This episode is called Grumpy Tea Leads to 999. And this is an episode where I want to talk about last year. I want to reflect on some quite awkward and distressing events that happened when Mick had the stem cell transplant in September 2023. So when the process went okay, the treatment was all fine while he was in hospital, and it was in September. And when he came out, he was discharged. I can't remember the date, but sort of towards the end of September. And he wasn't as strong as this time. I mean, to be fair, that's what I was expecting. He slept a lot. He stayed in bed until the afternoon when I bullied him to get up, to eat, to take his medication, to drink some water. And then I'd let him nod off in front of the TV because he was just so exhausted. Um, and it was to be expected. We'd been warned that this was how it would be, and that was fine. But it was a week later, in fact, a couple of days before, but a week later after he was discharged, it was his birthday. He was 61, and it was also my dad's birthday the day before. So my parents popped over for coffee and cake. Now, Mick and I have been together for 30 years. They know my parents really well. He's very comfortable with them. They knew that Mick would need, that he'd be weak and that, he probably wouldn't be good company, but they were just going to come pop in for a couple of hours to celebrate the birthdays. And if Mick wanted to go to bed or do whatever he needed, he can do whatever he wants because he's fine about that. So that morning, probably around lunchtime, when I'm like getting him up to get him dressed, it was a bit weird. And I brought him a cup of tea in bed while he was sort of helping wake up. And he said something to me. And I was like, I literally had no idea what he was talking about. I didn't understand the sentence at all. And then he wanted to tell me something about his tea. And he ended up saying, this tea is grumpy, a grumpy tea. I was like, what is he trying to say? I was trying to guessing, is it too hot? But he just couldn't explain. And it was like this all afternoon. And he did have some good moments, and he was obviously understanding what I was saying, and my parents were there, so we were having a chat. So he was sitting there, and he was sort of nodding and laughing in the right places, but he did keep quite quiet. And his mobility that day was shocking as well. I mean, his mobility is not good, but this was on a different level. He was really struggling. So after he managed a couple of hours and then he took himself off to bed. My mum and dad stayed for a little while longer and they headed off probably 6-ish in the evening. And as I waved them off, I can hear Mick shouting, Alexa, lamp on, which is odd because we don't have an Alexa in his bedroom. We do have a smart plug, and in the lounge, we've got this lamp which we can shout at to switch it on. But we haven't got that in his bedroom. So I thought, oh, that's a bit weird. So I went into his bedroom to find him on the floor. Oh, God. So there was no puddles of wee or anything. So he must have got to the toilet and then been getting back into bed from there. And I think he's just sat on the bed and he's like slipped off. Um, so now I know from a previous occasion when Mick's had a bit of an incident and fallen on the floor that I cannot pick him up on my own. I mean, I'm quite strong and he's not that big, but he can't help himself. And particularly when he's a bit confused like this, he's got no idea really what's going on. And when people fall like that, they become a dead weight. So there's literally nothing there. And it's just a solid, I mean, I don't know what he is, 12 stone, 11, 12 stone. It's really heavy. So I don't even think about it. Within 10 minutes, I have walked down to the end of the road and I've knocked on a neighbour's door and I've asked if they can come and help. And he happily came and helped me get Mick on the bed. I mean, he was in our house less than 2 minutes, got back on the bed. So then I'm like, I sit with him on the bed. And about every 10 minutes, he's trying to get out of the bed. And I keep stopping him because I know that if he gets out, he'll just fall again. And he's like, I need a wee, I need a wee. So I kept getting the bottle. We've got like a, proper continence bottle thing. So he was using the bottle. And this goes on for about 3 hours. And I'm sitting on this bed trying to stop him. And I'm thinking, this is ridiculous. This can't go on. I can't go on like this. It's exhausting. But I've got like no idea what to do. I don't know who to call. I don't know, what the right thing to do is, but I do realise that I definitely need help. So I go and pull out the discharge letter, and actually there's an emergency number for the ward on there. So I call that, I speak to the nurse, I explain, and as soon as I say that his speech is slurred and he's confused, she tells me to ring 999. It's a new experience. Never done that before. And somehow I feel slightly nervous doing it. Why is that? I don't know. That's what the service is there for. But I guess we always think that we can deal with it ourselves and we don't really need that help. But I think the nurse had given me permission, I guess, to call 999. So I did call them. And she was so helpful, the lady at the end of the phone. I explained that Mick had had this stem cell transplant. I explained all his symptoms, and she dispatched an ambulance. And she told me that they'd aim for 20 minutes, but it might be an hour or so. And I don't care now because I can cope with looking after him for that sort of period of time. I know that help is on the way. 18 minutes later, the ambulance arrives. They are fabulous. They check him over, they ask him questions. They can see that he's very confused, so I'm having to answer questions for him. And then they take his temperature and it's 39.8. I mean, that's on death's door. That is seriously high. So they think that he's got an infection. So they call the cancer emergency number, the lady that I spoke to. They speak to her, and they agreed to take Mick straight back to the cancer ward, which is fantastic because it meant that he wouldn't be sitting lying around in A&E for hours to get checked in. So it's about 11:30 at night when they pull off with him in the back, when he looked very sad, disappearing off into the ambulance on his own. But they just said to me, there's no point in you coming. Just call the ward in the morning and find out, how he is. But now I'm hyped up. The adrenaline's flowing. I'm wide awake. And I text my mum, who I know is not an early to bed person. And obviously, they'd seen Mick earlier in the day. She replies straight away. So I'm like, can I give you a call? Can I give you a call? We had a lovely midnight chat, and it was good just to process it and talk it through. And actually, bless her, my mum was thrilled that I'd called her, and we happily had a little chat. So I'm just cleaning my teeth at about 1 o'clock in the morning when I heard my phone ring. I didn't get to it, but fortunately they called back, and it was the nurse who could not get any sense out of Mick whatever. So she needed to ask me some questions. So then I called back in the morning, which he said to do. It had been, quite a stressful event. But when I called in the morning, they confirmed that he did indeed have an infection and was actually COVID positive. So now he's isolated and everyone has to get up to go in there. Where did he get the COVID? He must have left hospital with it because the only person who'd seen me before that was me, and I did not test positive for COVID. So, but it is what it is. I mean, it was a very stressful situation for both of us because he didn't know what was going on, which was really scary for him. And I was dealing with things that I'd never done before. And even though I'm a really capable person, it's still really daunting to go through all of this stuff. So if this resonates with you, then, don't be afraid. There are people there to help. And, I really did get the help that I needed. So, he was in there for another 5 days before he was well enough to come home. Once he did get home, he was fine until about 4 weeks later. He started showing signs of confusion again, and he said he didn't feel right. It wasn't the same as before. It wasn't that bad, that he was losing words, but this time he knew he was losing words. And he just said he just knew he didn't feel right. So I took his temperature this time, which I don't know why I didn't do before, but we've got a really crappy thermometer, and actually it indicated that his temperature was really low this time. I was like, okay. So, I mean, it didn't feel urgent, but I recognised that we did need some help. So I actually called 111. And they said a doctor or a nurse would call. They said that if they couldn't call within an hour or so, they'd just call an ambulance. I don't know why I didn't just call the ward. I have no idea why I didn't do that, but I didn't. Maybe I just, because it was 4 weeks later, I guess, by this stage. Anyway, to cut a very long and boring story short, we waited 7 hours for a nurse to call, who then upgraded us, called an ambulance, which then showed up within 20 minutes. I mean, we weren't bothered about the wait because it definitely wasn't urgent, and we wouldn't have wanted to push in front of other people who might need it more. My only issue was that I was supposed to be going out that night. I was supposed to be going out with some friends. We had a tasting menu evening where the guy does a demo. He shows you how he cooks the food, and then you eat the food that he showed you how to cook. And I was like, I really wanted to go, really wanted to go. And in the morning, when we rang the ambulance, probably about 11 a.m. or something like that, I thought I might still get there because they might just come and tell him that he's okay or whatever. But when we were still waiting at 6 p.m., I texted my friends to let them know that I wouldn't, there's no way I'd be joining them. Anyway, the ambulance then arrived just before 7 o'clock. They checked him over. Actually, his temperature was okay, but his blood pressure was high. They called the ward, and again, he was admitted again because they just wanted to go and check him over. So he disappeared off again. I waved him off again in this ambulance. And as the ambulance left and turned around the corner out of sight, I was in my car and heading out to dinner. I called one of my friends and said, I'm going to be late, but I am going to be there. And actually, as it turned out, I didn't miss any of the food at all. I missed the chef doing the demo to the starter, but that was all. So, I mean, is that bad? I don't think so. I couldn't do any more for Mick. He was in good hands. I wouldn't see him here tomorrow anyway. What was I going to do? Sit around and mope around at home watching telly? So no, I drove down there and rang them on my way. I rang my mum and dad on my way to let them know what was happening because I was supposed to see them on the way, but obviously I'd cancelled that early in the day. And actually, I had a really good evening. It was really nice to sort of like stop thinking about all of that stuff going on. I ate pheasant for the first time. I'd never eaten pheasant before, so it was nice actually. And we had a really good evening. And I even popped in to see my parents on the way home. I'd spoke to them beforehand and said, time is too late. They were like, oh, any time. I was like, no, give me a time. So only I think I got around there about 11:15 after the meal because they lived close to the restaurant. And yeah, I think they enjoyed the midnight visit. I think I stayed there till about 12:30, and then I headed home. No traffic at that time of the night, and then I got home and had just went to bed pretty much after that. Anyway, when I rang the hospital in the morning, turns out Mick had a urine infection, so he was treated with antibiotics and then sent home 2 days later. So hopefully this makes you understand why, with the current situation, when he had that incident where he wet himself and was a bit confused, it did concern me because last time this is what it ended up in. But fortunately, this time that hasn't happened, not as yet. We've still got time, but at the moment, all is good and he is absolutely fine. So I will let you know how it goes once he's been home for a week or so.